welcome back to Colicchio's Classroom. In this week's session, we're going to be talking about the Protestant Reformation. And today we're going to be looking at a few people who dared to challenge the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, the only Christian church of that time. Unless you forget the Eastern Orthodox, or the Coptic Christians, or the Anabaptists, or any of them really. But regardless, in Western Europe, the Catholic Church dominated all aspects of Europeans' lives at that time, controlling kings and peasants alike. That would change, and it all started with one man with a dream. No, other guy. Him, that guy, Martin Luther. All right, let's go. Martin Luther was a kid in law school when he had a near run-in with a bolt of lightning that would forever change his world and everybody else's at that time. He gave his life to God, became a monk, and left law school. And it's got to suck, because law school is expensive. Can't imagine what it would be back then. Now, the Catholic Church at this time was really busy building these really lavish churches like St. Peter's Basilica, which is like the Superdome of churches. To build these churches, as well as supply the popes with their luxurious lifestyles, they charged people with these things called indulgences, which is this topic of this week's mini-rant. Indulgences, the paying of one's forgiveness for their sins by reducing the amount of time in purgatory. This practice is so bad, it makes the person who made Swedish fish Oreos look like a genius. Now, this isn't actually in the Bible, but it would make the stories much more interesting if you think about it. You know, what if Adam and Eve eat the apple and God comes down and Adam just pulls out his checkbook and is like, wait a second, how much is this going to cost me to keep me in here? It's like rich parents at a private school. Even so, indulgences were outlawed in 1567, and they still left one of the biggest stains on the Catholic Church's long history, which is already terrible considering all the atrocities that they've committed over the years. So for indulgences to still be this bad in like top three, one of the worst things that they've done, it says a lot of stuff. So back to the lesson. Obviously, this angered the people who read the Bible and found out, hey, this isn't actually in there. So people like Luther, who knew Latin and could understand it and speak it and read it, found that, you know, there's nothing about indulgences in the Bible, and that you don't actually get to go to heaven based on your good deeds and paying, it's by your faith alone. Now, he wrote up a bunch of complaints, 95 theses, nailed them to the door, or that's how the myth goes. He might not actually have done it, but it was the Wittenberg Church in Wittenberg, Germany, and it's in response to these indulgences and these other practices the Catholic Church was practicing at the time. Luther was declared a heretic in 1521 at the Diet of Worms by the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, as well as the Pope, but he still managed to stay in hiding thanks to a couple of princes who were seeking an opportunity to make a little bit of money off of this Lutheran church. This is where his form of Protestantism starts, which is Lutheranism, and this is the idea that salvation is achieved through faith alone, and he also managed to translate the Bible at this time to the German vernacular, and due to the printing press, Gutenberg's printing press, he was able to distribute it to the people of the area, therefore separating him from people like Jan Hus, who was another person who spoke out against the church, but this guy actually got burned at the stake. So Luther's schism with the Catholic Church allowed for two other notable Protestant sects to emerge, Calvinism and Anglicanism. Calvin, who like Luther believed in the corruption of the Catholic Church, did see a problem with the idea of just faith alone for salvation. He believed in something called predestination, or the idea that God determines whether you're going to heaven or hell before you're even born. You know, which is incredibly parallel to the lifestyles at the time, because if you were born rich, you're going to stay rich, and if you're born poor, you're probably going to stay poor. Calvinists would find some troubles in France and England, but they did find a haven in Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Scandinavian countries. This will be important later. But let's talk about Anglicanism and Henry VIII, who at the time denounced Martin Luther and was proclaimed the defender of the Catholic faith by the Pope, which, spoiler, wouldn't last. Henry VIII was married to his brother's wife-to-be, Catherine of Aragon of Spain, who was much older than him, who was a younger man, wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, his mistress, and the Pope said, look, you're already married to Catherine, we can't really annul this marriage and have you marry Anne. And so he said, fine, I'll just get Parliament to create the Act of Supremacy and make me Henry VIII, king and also head of the church in England. And they did grant him a divorce, which he did use 4 more times, and killing 2 of his wives. Both named Anne, too. Interesting. Also, fun fact, when he became head of the church, his best friend at the time, Sir Thomas More, did not acknowledge him as that, and Sir Thomas More got executed. So, yeah, if people think that, like, Kanye and Jay-Z have beef, like, ooh, this is even worse. So the interesting thing is that the Catholics, when were very welcoming to these new Protestants, and were totally cool with Protestants starting their own churches and taking away their followers and stop giving them money. And no, I'm totally kidding. They were super pissed. The Catholics not only massacred the Protestants by thousands, like in France with St. Bartholomew Day Massacre and with Haarlem in Spain, but they started an entire counter-reformation. The Inquisition, started by Ignatius of Loyola, was led by Queen Isabella in the late 1490s. It's good to know that she was starting to target Protestants as well. This would also spread to the colonization in the New World and converting all them heathens that didn't believe in that white Jesus guy with nice facial hair. There was a lot of fighting between Catholics and Protestants all over Europe. In England, Mary, a queen that was Catholic, and her sister Elizabeth, a Protestant, often fought. In France, the Huguenots, a French Calvinist group, were butchered all over the country, and although allowed to stay in France due to Henry IV's passing of the Edict of Nantes, they fled to Switzerland, where John Calvin was. Then, like a powder keg, the conflict erupted into what was known as the 30 Years' War, where Austria, the Holy Roman Empire, kind of went against all these Protestant nations. But for some reason, France, a Catholic nation, joined on the side of the Protestants, most likely to go against Austria, who was like their biggest rival at the time. Now, the war lasted 30 years and ended with the Treaty of Westphalia, and it was a huge win for France because most of the Catholic powers, including the Holy Roman Empire, were really defeated, because what happened was Protestant religions were allowed to exist, and the princes at the time could choose who they wanted to be, whether they wanted to be Catholic or Protestant. Now, just for incentive, if you were Protestant, you could take all the money in those churches and use it for yourself. The Reformation began with a piece of paper that was nailed to the door of the Wittenberg church by a guy with a really bad haircut. Religion, which is a belief in a supernatural figure, or figures, usually gives you a set of rules and guidelines to live your life by and to how to treat other people. The interesting aspect of religion is that while it's a driver for so much unity and community, it actually is such a divider amongst the religions themselves, and is one of the biggest causes of why humans have killed each other over the course of human history. And it's a problem we still face today. Thanks for watching.